with us forever and ever and ever.
This happened about 10 years ago when I was in secondary school. That year, I had the morning session. Since my school was in Queenstown and I live in Jurong, I had to leave the house quite early to catch the 7 a.m. bus. Normally, I would get up at 6 a.m. to get ready for school. The night before the incident, my sister and I had difficulty sleeping because it was very warm. We shared the same bedroom. Since our father was working the night shift, we decided to sleep in our mother's air-conditioned room. I still couldn't sleep, so at 5:30 a.m. I decided to take a bath and get ready for school. I took my bath in my mother's bathroom and then went back to my room to get ready. I was combing my hair when I heard somebody calling me, "Sister, sister." I turned around, thinking my sister had woken up, but there was no one around. I went to my mother's room and found my sister still asleep. I grew scared but brushed it off as my imagination. I went back to my room to get my school bag and I heard it again. This time I heard a small child's voice calling me, "Sister." I turned and saw my sister's doll, the one that cries when you take out the pacifier, and its eyes actually blinked at me. I immediately ran to my mum's room and stayed there until 6:45 a.m. Once I got home from school, I took the doll and threw it in the storeroom. Since then, I have banned all dolls from my room. My parents bought me a Snoopy doll, the character that always walks around with a blanket, for Christmas in 1999. It was my first Christmas present actually. I think my parents bought it for me because it was my first book out during National Service, PTP. I was very touched. The doll was one of those with a turning key behind. You turn the key, release it, and then music starts playing, making the doll's head move. Eventually, I think the spring inside spoiled many years ago. Maybe in 2001 or 2002. Even if you turn the key now, it won't turn back by itself, so there's no music. You need to force it yourself to get the music, and it requires a bit of strength because the inside is quite rusty. However, I still kept the doll because it was a gift from my parents. I didn't touch it and just left it on top of my drawers as a display item. Then, one time, I was inside my room's toilet, doing my business, and didn't close the door properly because I was alone at home. I was reading a book at the same time when suddenly I heard music from inside my room. The music sounded familiar, but I couldn't recall it immediately. It was quite eerie because I was home alone, and the music seemed to come from nowhere. Then it hit me. It was the music from the doll. I was very scared at that moment because I knew the doll was broken, and unless you use a lot of strength to turn a key, it wouldn't play any music. The key is so hard to turn by force, so you have to do it very slowly, resulting in slow music. But the music I heard was at normal speed, which I hadn't heard since 2001 to 2002. After finishing in the toilet, hurriedly I admit, I peeked slowly into my room. The doll was still sitting there, on the display drawer. Has anyone else had a similar experience or any idea what might have been the reason? Do you think the mechanism suddenly became active again? Or had a last, final burst of life? Since then, I haven't heard the doll play. The key is almost impossible to turn. I'm afraid it might break if I use too much force. This is a scary experience that almost scared me half to death. When my parents got married, the couple who acted as matchmakers gave me a baby doll as a gift to celebrate my birth. The doll was the size of a 2-year-old child with curly brown hair that was almost blonde. The joints in the limbs could be moved, and it was a doll that you could play with by dressing it up and pretending to take care of it. It was a big version of what we now call Popo-chan. However, unlike Popo-chan, it wasn't cute, and its face was Western style, so not only was it not very cute, it was also a little scary. When I put it to sleep, it closed its eyelids with long eyelashes. For some reason, this doll has scared me ever since I was old enough to understand. However, this doll was quite large, and no matter where you put it in the room, it had a presence. So I just didn't like it, and it scared me. When I was in the 2nd grade of elementary school, my parents were transferred and we moved house. I was given my own room for the first time, but the door to the room was warped, so it didn't close smoothly. I had to push it hard to close it, and it made a squeaking sound, so it just didn't close properly. I kept the scary baby doll next to the door, and even though I was scared every day by seeing it, I kept it in my room for some reason. One day, a few years after moving into the new house, I was spending time in my room with the door half open. When I approached the door to move to another room, the half-open door started to close on its own. I wondered if the wind had caused the door to close, and just as I was about to put my hand on the doorknob, I looked at the baby doll next to me and saw that the baby's hand was moving as fast as the door was closing. I couldn't immediately grasp the situation, and I was too shocked to move right away. All I could think was, this is bad. I snapped out of it and opened the door with all my might, just as it was about to close. I then ran to my mother to escape. In a panic, I explained the situation to my mother and told her that I was scared of the baby doll. My mother laughed at how I was panicking, but she moved the doll to another room. After a while, she took it to the storeroom of my paternal grandparents' house because the doll was taking up too much space, and it also began to scare her. I can still find the doll in the storeroom if I search for it, but I'm scared to, and don't feel like getting rid of it, because it's human-shaped, and it feels wrong to do so. I still can't forget the feeling of when that door was closing unnaturally. I also remember hearing a giggling sound from the doll, and the doll's hands moving together. Anytime I think about it, I'm just terrified. Sorry for the long post. Maria is my sister, and Zubaida is my cousin. In the afternoon, Zubaida and our aunties came over. Soon it was night, and our aunties went home. Zubaida stayed over at my house because the next morning we were going to religious class. That night we slept in the double-decker bed. Maria slept on the top bunk, while Zubaida and I slept on the bottom bunk. We went to bed around 11. I couldn't really sleep because we kept talking and giggling. Later, Maria fell asleep. I saw Zubaida pulling at a black hair on the right-hand side near the wall. She asked me to check if it was Maria's hair. I looked up and saw Maria sleeping on the left side, so it wasn't her hair. I told Zubaida it must be her Barbie doll's hair. We decided to ignore it and tried to sleep. But as the room got quieter, I felt weird about the hair. I woke up again at night and saw the hair still there, swaying a little, like it was moving on its own. I was so tired and fell asleep again quickly, trying not to think about it. In the morning, Zubaida climbed up to Maria's bed to see if it was her Barbie. It was, but this time, the hair was yellow. What we saw the previous night was black. It was strange and creepy. Could Barbie have changed its hair color? Or was it ghost hair? We felt a shiver run through us. The room seemed darker, the shadows somehow scarier. Zubaida quickly turned the Barbie's face away, remembering what we heard from our elders. Any dolls or soft toys with eyes should have their faces turned away when someone sleeps beside them. If not, evil spirits can enter them and disturb you. Later, when we told our parents about it, our grandmother listened too. She came over, holding her rosary tightly. She told us an old story about a spirit that attached itself to a doll, haunting the children who played with it. The spirit would show itself changing the doll's hair to black as a warning. That night I was really scared. We kept the lights on and tried to sleep. I woke up and heard a scratching noise from the wall where the hair had been. Zubaida and I were too scared to move. I saw another strand of black hair slowly coming from the bed, almost reaching the floor. It seemed to move on its own. Morning came and we were relieved. Maria, not knowing what had scared us, played with her Barbie doll. Zubaida and I didn't talk about that night again, but we always made sure no doll's eyes were looking at us when we slept. And now, you know our story. If you don't believe it, try it yourself. But remember to turn the dolls' faces away from you when you sleep beside them. This story happened to me during the lunar 7th month, about 5 years ago, at block 262, Yushin Street, 22. I went over to my ex's house for dinner around 6 p.m. After dinner, I was bored enough to play with my ex's niece, nephews, and a bunch of other kids, aged around 5 to 8 years old, in one of the bedrooms. I was watching the kids play when suddenly a 5-year-old niece, Crystal, tripped over an English baby doll. The ones with the blinking eyes, eyelashes, you know, the ultra creepy kind. Crystal started crying, and, like most Chinese parents who hit whatever hurt their precious little child, I picked up the doll and started spanking its bottom repeatedly. It worked and Crystal started giggling, so I put the doll down on the ground and went to the living room to watch TV. Suddenly, my ex's older sister, Brenda, came out from the adjacent room asking which kid was the little prankster who tapped her from behind several times. Upon hearing the commotion, I asked her what happened. She explained that she was in the bedroom adjacent to the kids' room where the door was left ajar and the lights were turned off because her fiancé was taking a nap. With nothing else to do, she was gazing at the mall opposite the flat through the window when someone tapped her lower back from behind. The first time she ignored it, brushing it off as one of the kids playing a prank on her. The second time, she turned around and caught a glimpse of a half-naked, top half, kid dashing out of her room. Thinking that the kids were trying to play with her, she looked for them in the other rooms and was puzzled to find that all of them were fully clothed. She was certain of what she saw, but came out of the room puzzled. Who exactly was that little kid who was half naked? Brenda immediately related this incident to her aunt, who then sought help from a bomo over the phone. A bomo is basically a Malay shaman. This is where the creepy part begins. The bomo told her aunt to enter the children's room and look under the bed. He even described a feature for identification, the color of the doll's eyes, which were blue. I accompanied their aunt to the room and retrieved the doll, and to my astonishment, it was the doll that I spanked earlier. At that moment, many questions raced through my head. How did the bomo know there was a doll under the bed? How did the bomo know the color of the doll's eyes? Why did the kid not look for me, since I was the one who spanked the doll? The bomo immediately instructed their aunt to leave the doll under a tree in the estate's park, and we did. After this incident, we went out for supper, and we came back to find the doll already taken from the tree. Some more questions popped up. Who in their right mind would dare to pick up such dolls during the night of the lunar 7th month. My mum always emphasized never to pick up things during the 7th month, as they may be spiritually dirty. I kept quiet about the doll spanking incident for fear of getting a scolding from my ex. Of all the questions that went through my mind that night, only one was answered by another medium who was a friend of my mum. She claimed that I was sort of untouchable by dirty stuff because I have a pair of really thick eyebrows. Glad I have them. This is a story about a haunted doll. This particular doll was about the size and weight of a young toddler, and its name was William. My grandmother bought William at a flea market in the mid-1970s. It, whatever, was dirty, naked and torn, but she saw something about him that she liked, so she bought him anyway. She brought the doll home, cleaned it up, bought toddler-sized clothes for it to wear, named it and sat it in the rocker in her parlor. Once or twice a year, grandmother would buy William a new outfit to wear and give him another good cleaning. Then back in the rocker he would go. William sat there for years. William always scared me when I was a kid. Not only did I have a phobia of mannequins to deal with, but William himself was strange looking. He was a very lifelike doll, but his face wore an expression that struck me as much too aware and knowing to belong to a child of the age William was supposed to be. Rather than see him as a toy child, I regarded William as an adult in miniature, and not a particularly nice adult at that. To me, when I was 10, William looked like he knew where I slept and wanted me to know that he knew. If garlic had been a deterrent for dolls instead of vampires, my room would have smelt like a pizza. But William never visited me while I was growing up, and he never gave any indication that he was anything other than a big doll with a strange expression. That was until my grandmother passed away, and William went to live with my Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Nelson. Lorraine's kids, Michelle and David, were 11 and 9 respectively, just about the age I had been when I first encountered William, and their reaction to him was remarkably similar. He made them nervous. Their mother had propped up William on a wingback chair in the living room, and both kids told me that it was eerie to get up at night to use the bathroom and find William dimly illuminated by the hall light, seeming to watch their comings and goings. From his seat, they said, William could clearly see the doors for both their rooms. Doors they had been keeping closed at night so William couldn't watch them sleeping. Even with the door closed, Michelle remembered recently, it was like I could still feel him staring at me, waiting for me to come out. Eventually, William stopped waiting. One night, David got up to a sleeping house for a trip to the bathroom and was surprised to find that William wasn't in his usual spot. David was the younger of the two children, but also the more level-headed. He decided that his mother must have moved the doll after he had gone to bed, maybe to clean it up or dress it in a new set of clothes, as my grandmother had done. He finished in the bathroom and returned to bed, neglecting to shut his door. As he tucked himself back in, his sleepy eyes widened in alarm. There, back in his usual spot, was William. David leapt from his bed and quickly closed and locked his bedroom door. I didn't know where William had been, he said, but I sure didn't want him in my room. A few nights later, Michelle awoke to take a trip to the bathroom. Casting a wary eye at William, she found him in his usual spot on the chair. On entering the bathroom, she noticed that the toilet paper roll was empty. So, she returned to the hall, where a new package was in the linen closet just outside the bathroom. Once back in the hall, she yelped in alarm. William was crumpled on the floor about 4 feet in front of his chair. To me, she said, it looked like William had climbed down and headed for the open door of my room, but stopped when I came out of the bathroom. Michelle ran back into her room and huddled in her bed. The bathroom could wait until morning. She fell into a fitful sleep and woke early with the sun just beginning to stream in through her window. Her need for the bathroom was urgent now, so she hurriedly unlocked and opened her door. and screamed, rousing the rest of her family from their beds because when she pulled open the door, William fell into the room. He had apparently been leaning against the door, waiting for it to open. Lorraine and Nelson couldn't have been oblivious to the goings-on. They couldn't help but notice that their kids had suddenly started locking their doors at night, but they had attributed that to the kids' increasing desire for privacy and the impending rush of puberty. Neither David nor Michelle had mentioned to them their experiences with William, and even though Lorraine had already begun to feel a certain unease about the doll, she never made the connection until the morning Michelle woke her up with her scream. But Lorraine had noticed William's inexplicable refusal to stay put weeks earlier. Nearly every day she would have to put William back in his chair, at least once, and often several times. She had no idea how the doll could keep tumbling out of the big chair. She wasn't able to knock the doll down without applying enough force to actually fling him from the chair, so she saw no way for him to simply fall out. But fall out he seemed to do, over and over again. One afternoon, a few days before Michelle's morning scream, Lorraine hadn't been feeling well, and so laid down for a brief afternoon nap. She awakened an hour or so later to find William in bed beside her. She was initially quite spooked, but soon deduced that one of the kids, who had come home from school while she had slept, had placed the doll there as a joke. It was only later that she decided otherwise. The day Michelle had her morning encounter with William, Nelson put the doll in the attic. He believed none of what the kids were saying, but agreed to hide the doll away to mollify them, for they were genuinely afraid. He told the story to my mother a few weeks later, and she told him that she'd like to have the doll if Nelson and Lorraine weren't planning to keep it around. Nelson agreed and went to the attic to get it for her, and was unable to find it. Nelson tore the attic apart, but William was gone. That was nearly 10 years ago, and William hasn't turned up again since. This is a story from when I was in elementary school. Sorry, but I'm not good at writing, but I love other people's ghost stories. I also get scared very easily. For example, when I'm alone at night, I can't look directly at the mirror or TV screen in my room. That's why I quickly turn off all the lights and hide in bed. In my room, there was a doll that looked like a cheap French doll. I was fine with this doll when I was little, but now I'm afraid of it. So I turned it from facing forward to sideways so that it couldn't look at me. That night, my body stopped moving. My breathing was also intermittent and painful. Then, something flowed into my right ear. It was like a rough man's voice, like a spell. I was half panicked and tried to speak. However, the more I tried to speak, the more I stopped breathing. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were open or not. It was pitch black and I couldn't see anything. Suddenly I heard a sharp crack, and I thought, it's broken. Then the whole room became bright. The lights were still on. I was relieved, convinced that it was just a bad dream. Feeling relieved, I looked around the room and tried to go back to sleep. But then I noticed something. The doll on the right dresser was facing forward, i.e., towards me. Panicking again, I ran into my parents' room and slept there that night. The next day at school, I told my childhood friend who lived next door. I had a scary dream last night. My childhood friend only said, "Oh," taking it half-heartedly. That day, I invited my childhood friend over to my house. When I showed my childhood friend the doll, she said, "Wow, it's a big doll," and seemed happy. "That's nice. This is the doll from your dream, right? It's cute. If you don't like it, you can give it to me." My childhood friend seemed to want to take the doll. I've gotten so many Rika dolls up until now, and so the doll was taken to her house. The next morning I looked in the mirror and was shocked. The right half of my face was covered with what looked like acne. Ew, that's gross. But there was nothing I could do. I went to school as usual. When my friend saw my face at school, she screamed, "What's that?" I pretended that I didn't know about it, so I answered, "What is it, acne?" Then she said, "Mirror, nurse's room," and gave me a small stick mirror. The acne on my face had turned into a bright red scratch. I don't remember scratching it. I rushed to the nurse's room and had it washed. The teacher said it was an inflamed pimple. I hadn't even touched it. I mentioned the doll, but it seemed to be displayed as if nothing had happened. That night I was lying in bed, and the right half of my face was extremely hot. The hair that had stuck to my neck with sweat was frizzy. I heard yelling coming from my friend's house. I don't know if it was a husband-wife fight or a parent-child fight, but it's not uncommon. It's a house where they fight all the time. "It's a fire." I jumped out of bed. The light was on again. I straight away thought it was my house. I figured it must be my brother's room next door. His room was a garbage dump, and he slept in a closet and smoked in there. Could that be why my face felt hot earlier? But then, my assumptions were completely off. It was my childhood friend's house that was in flames. My parents rushed out and told me to stay in my room, so I went to sleep, shivering. The next day, more than half of my childhood friend's house had burned down. When I went to school, I was told about the fire and asked for donations to be collected, starting the next day. My childhood friend went to school as usual, but everyone else was still a little reserved. What caused the fire? I couldn't bring myself to ask. However, my childhood friend started telling me the story herself. My dad found my doll. He yelled, "Where did you bring it?" in a very angry tone. I told him I got it from you, but he suddenly lost his temper, set it on fire and threw it to the floor. The word doll sent chills down my spine. What? So that's the cause? No way. The fire went out immediately, but the face was burned, so I just threw it away. I'm sorry. I just shook my head silently. Her father seems to be a person who gets angry easily, and he has hit things and set fires in the past. This fire was also caused by careless handling of fire. The doll in my room, the smell I heard from the right, the inflammation on the right side of my face, the hot face, the burned face of the doll. It was scary because it seemed like everything was connected. By the way, she moved out and is now attending a normal high school and is doing very well. I have become even more scared since that incident. However, it seems that she still collects Sylvanian families as a hobby. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you have a story to share, please send it to my email in the description below. This channel is mostly made up of stories sent in by viewers or people they know. Another way to support the channel is to sign up for my Patreon, where you can watch my videos ad-free. More perks will be added in the new year. Also, I will be adding new designs to the merch store, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all for your continuous support. And remember,
Papa loves you.